Hello, it's Michael from Fujifilm. Today's episode is going to be about modifying or simplifying the exposure controls on Fujifilm X Series cameras. Now, this is for those of you out there who have had the camera for a while and maybe didn't know that we had some little hidden features. And it's also for those of you that are looking to switch from other manufacturers into our line of cameras and aren't quite used to our retro design. Now, what I'm talking about today is going to be to the series of cameras that have a dedicated shutter speed knob on the top of the camera. And this would be the XT cameras, the T33, T4, the X100 series of cameras, the X Pro series of cameras, and even the XE models, okay? So, this shutter speed knob on the top, I happen to like it, but I come from shooting film cameras from quite a while ago as well. I find it very convenient with the camera up to my eye that I simply put my thumb on the top wheel and turn it that way, and I don't have a problem in switching exposures. However, sometimes I want to have a subtle change in exposure for shutter speed, but I don't want to get away from the particular range of shutter because of whatever the action is happening. So these are obviously in whole stop jumps, a 15th of a second, a 30th of a second, a 60th of a second, and so forth and so on, okay? Now, what if I only need to go from a 60th to say an 80th of a second? How do I do that? It's actually very, very simple, and it's default out of the box your cameras do that. It's the rear command wheel, the back command wheel. So you turn it to the right, you turn it to the left, and the shutter speeds will go up to 2/3 faster in shutter speed and 2/3 slower in shutter speeds, depending on whatever you're physically set on the knob. Now, if I do need to make the full jump to that next actual number, if I do need to go from a 60 to 125, I have to turn the knob. I can't do it by way of the wheel. Okay, now on cameras like the XE series, there is no rear wheel, so there's only the front wheel. This operation would be performed by way of the front wheel. You get the 2/3 up, the 2/3 down. Some of you are going, okay, but the system I'm coming from doesn't work like that. I find that way too limiting. I don't like it. Easy fix. Turn the shutter speed knob to the T position, T for time. Some of our cameras, you can lock it that way with a button on the top. And now when it's in the T position, that rear command wheel takes over all the shutter speeds, the entire shutter speed range of whatever camera you have, from a full hour to a 32,000th of a second, if that's available, okay? No having to turn the knob whatsoever. It's back there on the rear thumb wheel all the time. Okay, now, similarly, there's something you can do with aperture control as well. I, again, happen to like our retro f-stop rings on most of our lenses. But you'll notice some of the lenses have an A, stands for auto. The lenses that don't actually have a marked aperture ring will have a switch on them that goes from iris, which is manual, to A. Same thing. When the lens is set to A, which stands for auto, which means the camera will set the f-stop automatically per the meter, if you instead don't want it to do that, you can tell the camera that you want to control the aperture by way of the front wheel by going into the menu, and you go into button dial settings, and under button dial settings you will find something called, very simply, aperture ring setting parentheses A. So if you go to the right and change it from auto to command, now the front wheel will be able to set your f-stop whenever your lens aperture is set to the A position. On the XE series, when you do that, now again, this will be on the front wheel only, The front wheel has actually a detent toggle position. When you pull that wheel inwards, there's a click, and it will switch between shutter speed and aperture very, very simply. Furthermore, you can add yet another level of wheel control to the front wheel, and that is for ISO control. And this is similar to the aperture ring. When you turn the ISO knob on the camera to A for auto, okay, if you go into the menu and go into button dial and go to the ISO dial setting parentheses A, you go to the right, again, you can choose this to say command instead of auto. And that means when the ISO button, the ISO knob is set to A, you can now do ISO control from the front wheel. So now, according to what I've just done, the front wheel now does two things. It does f-stop and ISO. So for the XT series, the X100s, the X Pros that have a front and a back wheel, again, that front wheel has a detent position when you pull it in. And when you pull it in, it will toggle back and forth between f-stop and ISO. So that's how you set up our cameras for full wheel control if you don't like the retro knob style. I hope this has been helpful. See you next time.